How are you? Welcome to Story Time. So this has been a regular weekly event at 11:30, and then that was fine, but I added a new morning class on Tuesdays, and I'm having to realize that I can't close up class at 10:15 or 11:15 and be ready for this at 11:30. So fingers crossed. Facebook won't let me edit the schedule within the Facebook calendar. At least it won't let me do it as I tried today. So it may be that it's going to just be a little bit off for the next couple of weeks. I intend to take the month of August off from live broadcasting, in which case that's my downtime to recalibrate and to set kind of a schedule and a plan for the new year, the new academic year, so to speak. As an old academic, I still love that fall launch schedule. So Guru Circle and Women's Circle, and I'm even doing a pitch to ramp up the Yoga Living group for the fall launch. And if you are ready to go deeper into your yoga study, and that's for those who are already perhaps yoga teachers who've already completed a 200-hour curriculum, if you're ready to dive deeper into the philosophy and the adaptation of developing a personal practice and being able to cater to individuals within a group practice or even one-on-one setting, consider Yoga Foundations, the teacher training and practice deepening curriculum that I offer. That will launch in September of this year as well, with the option to do that curriculum virtually or in person and in real time. So why am I talking about all these opportunities? Well, because opportunity at its heart is the essence of freedom. And since we've been celebrating independence, not only in the sense of the anniversary birth of our nation, but also in terms of the reopening, fingers crossed that we can remain open after this year plus of being distanced, being protected, being isolated due to COVID-19. So I was thinking a lot about when I experience freedom most tangibly. And I was thinking even back to the story of my life, in which the first time I really felt that energy of freedom, that permission to be a little more autonomous and independent, was when I was but a wee thing, probably 6 or 7 years old, and I was given permission to walk to the public library by myself from my home. Now, I don't know how far that actually was. It couldn't have been that far for my parents to allow me as a young child to make that walk. But I do know that it was a walk over a rather active railroad track. Now, as a mom, maybe I'm a little too much of a helicopter mom, or was, but I can't imagine watching my child walk away any farther than a block, let alone over the railroad tracks, which was probably at least half a mile or more to the library. But I can remember the exhilaration that I felt of being trusted enough to go on my own, to be free enough to walk as fast as I want. Yeah, I knew the rules. I knew how to be safe, but I also had this bigness about my newfound freedom. Now, similarly, much later in my life, when I rode my bike cross country, so this is post-graduate school, I'd already been working in my professional arena for a few years, and I took time off with no real re-entry date to ride my bicycle cross country from the West Coast to the East Coast and then down the East Coast. So about 5,000 miles. And there was a lot of fear in my being when I arrived in the Seattle airport and had to reassemble my bicycle, pedal bicycle, after it was contained in a box for the trip. So I had to reassemble. That's another story for another time. But I was meeting a group of people whom I had never met, and yet empowered by my own physical energy on my bicycle, I found my way around this new city, away from the airport and downtown to the hostel, and then across the country, and again, a total of about 5,000 miles over the course of that summer. Some of that with a contained group, some of that independent, but all of that self-contained, meaning I carried my tent and my sleeping bag and my clothes and my equipment, and we made our own meals together. And in that sense, this, remember, was before cell phones existed. So I had scheduled times when I would call those who needed to know where I was, namely at that time, my parents. So once a week I would get to a town in the middle of the afternoon and plug my quarters into a what are those called? A phone booth, and call my folks. Sometimes having to leave a message because my schedule was kind of erratic, being that I was riding on my bike. But the nutshell of both of these stories is that my environment was safe enough. I was privileged enough to be safe and have the resources to do something that was a bit of an adventure. To take 4 months off from life, from work, from regular day-to-day toil. Most of the folks on my ride were retirees. I was still in the heart of my profession. And yet, that was key to me because it helped me realize that I didn't want to wait for retirement to start living my life. Much like walking to the library, there was a freedom not only in the walk, but in the adventure of finding my own books to read. Reading was also a favorite adventure of mine as a child, still is today. Not only to travel to far off lands, but also to learn things that I may not otherwise be exposed to. And again, can you hear the undercurrent here, which is opportunity and access? Freedom without opportunity and access is a pipe dream. So it makes me want to recommit in my practice, in my way of living in this modern world, to finding spaciousness, to finding permission and access, not just for myself, not just for my children and my students, but for my community, and for those who particularly might still be without the freedom to access, to engage, to have the opportunity to try something different, to access what they need, be that healthcare, be that housing, be that food, be that enrichment and enlightenment. It's one of the reasons why, deep down, my aspiration as a studio owner is to make the yoga practice free to anyone who wants to attend, virtually or in person. Now, the truth of the matter is, right now, I can't afford to do that. The practice and the students that have been participating, particularly over COVID, have made it possible for me to stay here, to be here in this physical space, to pay the rent and the utilities and the services, and be here to support those of you who are on this journey. But what would it mean if we could really get to the place where this kind of opportunity for transformation, for growth, for personal, supported self-care was available to anyone who is willing to seek it out? I don't have the solution at this time, but I have the intention in my heart to work towards making yoga, the practice in a community setting, a small, intimate community setting, or even a larger venue, to make that available to anyone, all shapes, sizes, colors, experience levels, because within the practice, we can discover the true essence of freedom, no matter what our range of motion, our age, our mobility, our size, our access to financial stability. within the practice of breathing, moving, and resting, we can break free from the myths, from the untruths, from the trauma that has perhaps defined us as unworthy from an external perspective or from an internal perspective. So I'm curious as to what stories you have with your own experience of freedom, and whether or not your experience, like mine, might be evidence of the availability of opportunity, in which case maybe there are others, even within your circle, who don't have that same access to opportunity, in which case an invitation to join you, an invitation to try something new, permission, encouragement. Invitations can show up in so many ways. Even if it doesn't require your financial contribution, it requires an energy investment. And that's yoga, my friends. Energy, our attention, the greatest gift that we could ever give to ourselves in self-care and to each other. This is the practice of ahimsa, the practice of compassion. In other words, there is no freedom without the practice of compassion. And the practice of compassion begins when we breathe, when we choose to show up and cultivate space for the practice of living more authentically. I'd love to hear your stories of freedom, your stories of independence and discovering your own truth, how you were entrusted with a little more autonomy, and maybe what happened when that autonomy was lost, whether it was because you violated the trust or whether it was reneged out of fear, pulled back out of punishment. This power relationship is often what makes freedom truly unattainable for so many of our fellow human beings. Because enough of us are still holding on to power as somehow that validating and justifying our worth, rather than recognizing that sharing power is the sharing of responsibility. And when we share responsibility, we share the burden, releasing the trauma, the heaviness, the overwhelm that often keeps us small, contained, fearful. Thanks for joining me for story time. I'd love to hear from you. And in the meantime, take care of you. Practice your self-care habits. Take care of each other. Share those gifts of your attention. May you breathe deeply and move freely. Labor lovingly and live vibrantly. Namaste.